Going back to one of the first concerns, public safety and threats to people in Keener Plaza and throughout the city. To me, the greatest threat I'm seeing are not tents possibly catching on fire or environmental hazards at any particular location, but certain violent criminals, registered sex offenders who have been arrested and then released within 24 hours. I know personally this is out of Keener Plaza. There's actually a homeless encampment by the river. A registered sex offender who has no permanent address and has failed to register as required by law was released within 24 hours. I consider that a greater threat to public safety than anyone holding public forums in a public park. We've had several others. We try our best to maintain what we call principles of city space. I know that there's an active discussion of how to do so, what those principles should be, and how can we enforce it. We have no legal authority as private citizens. So when citizens break not ordinances or regulations, but felonies, major felonies, and we ask the police to arrest these individuals, I do not see them following due process with those individuals. Second, with regard to the homeless population in general, I have been part of that population. I don't like to use the term homeless. I'm residentially challenged. I have several homes, but I do not have a legal residence. And that will occur on my own timetable. I'm well aware of the variety of services available to that population and the difficulty in many of them in partaking in those services, especially to any chronic situation. I also know as far as accommodating various groups throughout the city, the homeless, the residentially challenged, and others, the city owns several thousand properties, both residential and commercial, that I see deteriorating, not being used, not being put back on the tax rolls, far too much reliance on private development to put those back on the tax rolls. I think the city has a vast amount of resources, but they are limited, but they definitely need to be more focused to help the citizens of this region. And I'm not seeing that occur in the 7 years that I've been in this city.
But we should address, perhaps, this feels like a question to me about both perhaps for Occupy as well as for others about the what do you call it, the registry of properties that LRA and that the Land Regionalization Authority and the San Luis Development Corporation own. I don't know.
What's the question?
Well, I don't have a question. I just want to make
okay, let's leave that for now then.
And I think my final point.
I would just, I'd be happy to say just a couple words. I'd say you left out public education. You know, we have a public education system that's terribly challenged too. You've given us, sort of the litany of challenges that we face in the city. We have many challenges here. What I would say is that St. Louis is not for everyone because it's for everyone. And when you have large concentrations of people who have high needs, and you try to take limited resources to find a way to meet as many of those needs as you can and to put them in the right priority, you're not always going to get them right. In terms of your first issue of public safety, as Jeff says, with some frequency, we spend between $200 and $250 million a year to field sort of pound for pound one of the largest municipal police departments in the city, to run our courts, to have a well-staffed prosecutor's office, to have probation and parole, corrections in order to enforce the law. Do we do it perfectly? We don't. Are there things that still require much attention? Yes, there are, including the whole question of where has incarceration gotten us? We could have a big, long philosophical discussion about that. We live in a city in which there was much disinvestment for many years, where people fled the city, in part because of race, in part because of class, but we've seen that sort of turn around in some ways. Do we have it all figured out? No, we don't have it all figured out. But in terms of keeping the city stable and keeping it open and a welcome place for all people, including middle-class people and more affluent people, as well as welcoming people from all walks of life, including our poor, embracing our poor. We try to be even-handed in enforcing the law and try to be wise. I do think that, but it's imperfect. I would agree with you.
All right, if I can finish my final point and readdress that point. My final point is finding a public space available to those who wish to use it. This movement began on Wall Street. challenging 24-hour financial global markets. And this is a global movement in response to that. We have to be ready to challenge them 24 hours, the same hours that they are open. That's why I firmly believe in having, and going back to the first part, since I became of age, I've seen municipal, state, federal governments engage in selective enforcement for a variety of reasons, political, financial, what have you. And seeing this country that I grew up in, I have no problem engaging in civil disobedience and providing selective obedience to laws. I obey the vast majority of the laws for the future of a common good. You know, they uphold the ideals in our Constitution. A great many other laws do not. And I see no reason why I, as a citizen of this country, should obey those laws which restrict my rights.
Well, we have a great tradition of civil disobedience in this country, and much exactly from that point of view.
Eddie, let's not monopolize the conversation.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So, but actually, yeah, we're taking this back. I do feel like there's teasing out a question though from Sasha's point that I've heard, so I'm going to take a prerogative here. Because there's a great inventory of buildings, is there a building that might be available as a space in the city's inventory?
There are no buildings available that you want, because the reason, and I don't want to turn this into a 25-minute thing, but don't take that long, but I won't. The reason that there are abandoned buildings in the city is that the city was very densely populated after World War II. 900,000 people lived in the city, today it's 320,000. So when 580,000 people leave a place, they leave behind abandoned property. So what the city has gotten, the city is not a real estate developer in the sense that we go out and buy all the good stuff. The city is a real estate owner of last resort for people who abandon stuff that's all the bad stuff. And I am not aware of any buildings, and I asked LRA, of any buildings that you would want to be in, because they might collapse on you, because they are abandoned, and the reason they're abandoned is nobody wants them. So, you know, we don't have any buildings. What I would suggest is if, you know, and I'm only suggesting this, you all got to figure out your thing, but I mean, the labor unions have, some of the labor unions have space, and we'd certainly be willing to do our part to help facilitate a move into that space as quickly as possible. And that would be habitable space, safe space, space that's not open to the elements, and space that would not collapse on you and hurt you.
So LRA, just so people know, is the city agency that owns most of the vacant property, or most of the abandoned property in the city. Let's see, Sasha, I had Reese.
Sure. My veterans piece have been occupying cities and parks and spaces since 1985, and no tent has ever burned up. Out there somewhere, some schools that burn tents. But we can certainly keep any tents that are in any occupied space from ever burning up. We don't need to worry about that. And ma'am, I've been to London several times and have seen the public speaking there, and that is wonderful. The city should have something like that. And all cities should have something like that. There should be spaces like that where anyone just gets on their soapbox and starts talking, and the crowd gathers around it. It seems interesting to them. And that that does go towards freedom of speech. But it really doesn't go to the right of assembly. This is a very small occupation currently. I haven't asked any of my veterans or these people to come to St. Louis. There's the Army, Navy, Marines. There'd be all sorts of Iraq veterans against the war, occupying Marines. There could be, just in terms of military people, this could be an extremely large occupation, and you need to realize that the right of assembly is considered in that possibility. And as she said, visibility. Visibility is really the key thing. It goes to freedom of speech. If you're not visible, if you're causing someone not to be visible, that is a reduction in the freedom of speech. I know what the city has done to help homeless and homeless vets. And it's very good. And we try very hard. It's a very difficult situation. And we appreciate some things that have been done. And so you're with Parks, right?
Yes.
The kept that part of Keener Plaza that we occupy was very clean. It was disappointing to me when the ball game happened and then the upper part of Keener Plaza was used as a trash can by the ball players, fans. So the next day, when I saw that, and I have pictures of it with the broken glass and the trash everywhere, some of us was trying to clean it up. It was dangerous, and the guys didn't get there till was it Sunday afternoon or something?
They were there Saturday afternoon.
Saturday, I was thinking all Saturday it was not clean up, but there was a real dangerous situation which we were sort of unhappy about. So,
So next on staff is speaking of the ball game, something that I think most of us agree with the world champion Cardinals. So you're sure you can. You're on.
I just want to make a brief statement. Seems like for a long time, when events and issues happen, the media, especially the ones associated with large conglomerates, have been straying away from the truth. While the media is here, I'd just like to urge all media representatives to pass the message on to their, their supervisors, to double and redouble the efforts to report the truth whenever possible, and when opinions are used in a story, make sure you hear opinions from both sides. I appreciate that.
I have guy in the brown shirt with the dollar, I guess the Toyota hat. Or no. Next on Matt, on staff.
Did you not want to?
Did you want one? No, not you. Yeah, you signed up for it.
I was basically going to state that when I talk about all the homeless in the city and all the programs that they have for the homeless, it's really a catch-22 because the only way you can be a part of these programs is with forced religion. And so a lot of people choose not to be forced into a religion due for a homeless situation. And if you say that you're for helping the homeless people, what other kind of revenues would you be willing to go to help people that are laid off of corporation jobs and they have no other option but to be homeless? How can we help them?
Can I respond to that? There is no forced religion. If you're talking about New Life Evangelistic Center, that is not one of the city's facilities, not part of our continuum of care. One thing I did want to mention too, just to respond to his suggestion about adopting something that's been done in Keener Plaza. Every night in the city we care for something close to 3,000 residentially challenged people. I'll give you that terminology. Every night through the city's programs, we're providing those kind of services. This is a gigantic effort that we're engaged in on a regular basis. One other thing I want to mention, we just eliminated the residency policy that had been standing in the way. Okay? That just happened last week. So it means that people that are homeless in the city, they're homeless people. And we'll provide services to those individuals. That just changed last week.
And to answer your question, and again, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so it would take too long to explain our budgetary tale of woe. But suffice it to say, the city government is very limited in its resources. But what you should know, and where I think you all should direct some of your ires at the federal government, which, for instance, is cutting, severely cutting, because I know this because I met with the executive director of the St. Louis Housing Authority today, is severely cutting funding for low-income housing, and is also severely cutting what's known as the Community Development Block Grant, which is money that's set aside to invest in the kinds of things that you're talking about. Federal government spends an enormous amount of money, and I think we can all agree on that, or misspends an enormous amount of money. I wish we had the money for this stuff. We were able to provide the municipal services, that people expect from us, nonetheless, to start doing the federal government's job. And we really shouldn't have to do the federal government's job when they have the money and we don't. So the mayor has been lobbying hard in Jefferson City, them too, but in Washington, to save those programs, and it's certainly something that you all could focus, and some of the unions could focus your attention.
The person with the daisy next to James, you were next on staff.
Yeah. Okay. Just kind of a question, something that kind of bothered me. You said you had to do your thanking with Bank of America because you had to show support with everything, with national. I forget the exact wording, but you basically along the lines of you had to show support with everybody, local and national. Why choose to show support in national corporations with money, with the city's money, when you can just as easily show support in other ways and show support in city banks with city money?
Well, first of all, I didn't say that we feel compelled to do it. What I said was, he asked a specific question, which was a legitimate question, will you disinvest? And I won't disinvest. However, I'm not in charge of the investment policies, but I do know we do in fact invest with local banks. I can't tell you, we might not even have any money with Bank of America. I don't know because the Treasurer's Office handles that. I do know we have money with small local banks. I can't tell you whose money is, how much we have with which one, but he asked me a specific question of whether we would disinvest, whether we would, the mayor would support disinvesting. And that was the question I answered. We're for local banks, and I'm sure we invest with local banks.
Who was next? Let's see, next page. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to, first off, on a positive note, I want to say that several times I've been down here, 3 or 4 times in marching, I've been very proud of not only us, but of the St. Louis Police. I think they have been very, very, very professional, polite, the opposite of open. And I want to say thank you for that and that spirit that you're trying to show. But I want to reiterate again, it'd be real nice to give us a little spot someplace, but that isn't going to hit it. We need the visibility. And even if we were to take the tents down at night and put them back up in the day, that wouldn't solve your problem, which is the visibility, because we're messy looking. And democracy is a messy process.
Well, I'm not going to address the opinion question, because again, I don't want to monopolize, but the 2 questions regarding to policy. First of all, there's not one issue, but 2 issues. There's no structure, day or night, in the park, and there is a curfew. So they're 2 different things. But I also have a question, which is, how much space do you have to occupy 24 hours a day? Do you have to occupy, you decide that, or could it be a corner? I mean, and I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just asking the question. When you say that you need to occupy a space, some of you have said you need the ability to assemble at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you sort of suggested, but I could have misheard, that you need a space. So the question is, could you occupy a relatively small space to be an occupied movement?
Visibility.
Well, I got the visibility part, but I mean, how big does the space have to be?
Depends on how big we get.
Okay, so it's not a small space, it really is only a matter of assembly, it is not a matter of holding a space.
It's a matter of maintaining a visual presence, permanence.
I got that, that's easy.
To keep getting your message across, putting people aside and maybe it wouldn't look so messy, it looked prettier downtown, but that's the whole point. We want people to see.
So let me just ask a question in response to that, just so, and this kind of follows up on Jeff, so that we have a good understanding of it. So if you have unfettered use of Keener Plaza, unfettered within reason, reasonable use of Keener Plaza from 6 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and you have, and you can be a presence on the sidewalk around Keener Plaza 24 hours a day, and if we were to add a speaker's corner also centrally situated in which assemblies between the hours of, it would be available 24 hours a day and would be of special use, for assemblies that would occur after curfew when you have to be out of the park and on the sidewalk, but could occupy the corner as a speaker's corner to hold your assemblies and engage in whatever speech with your assembly on the sidewalk around it and in that corner, in a central and visible part of St. Louis. How does that strike people, as being a way of...
That would have to go to the assembly.
You're right, so there's a process.
Yeah,
I want to so it sounds like what we're doing, we're at the hour point, there's both a category of people who want to keep talking about a lot of different things, and then there's some more direct conversation about give and take on space and ideas. I'm not going to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't say, but as we go down stack, I think there's a couple questions that have been asked. It might be helpful for people to respond on how they're thinking about what might be possible, either to what Eddie and Jeff's point is, or to other points and ideas that might be out there.
Yeah, and you can, whichever one you want to do is fine. I just don't want there to be a misunderstanding. You can express your First Amendment rights, you can march, you can rally within your First Amendment rights. You can use Keener Plaza like everybody else can use your Keener Plaza. What we're saying is that our rules don't allow structures in the park, and the ordinance says, and I get we disagree on this, but I just want you to understand, so there's no misunderstanding, and we have an ordinance that says that we have a 10 o'clock curfew. So, you know, I'm sure some of the press has reported that we want you out of Keener Plaza. You can use Keener Plaza the same way every other citizen can use Keener Plaza. And we are not trying to, you know, I know that you disagree with us on this because of the restrictions that I mentioned under our rules and regulations, but I did not want there to be any misunderstanding, because I've seen some press reports that said that you couldn't be in the Keener Plaza, and that I don't know where they got that, but they didn't get it. And I get the disagreement on the other two issues.
John Chasnoff was next on staff.
So I work at the ACLU, and I have attorneys whispering in my ear about the First Amendment and what it means and what the current status of the law is, and I've had the privilege of being at Keener Plaza and arguing that issue with folks, and understanding the current status of the law, and also understanding the long tradition of civil disobedience. So I just wanted to say that I do come at this with some understanding about your point of view about the current state of the law and your need to enforce ordinances.
If, by the way, to your point, you know, if you went to a judge and a judge said this is what the law says, we're going to enforce the law. And we're not, you know, so that's certainly a right under the Constitution.
And I think there's a long tradition of pushing the First Amendment in new directions, and it comes sometimes through civil disobedience and sometimes in the courts. And but I wanted to ask two specific questions that I thought might help clarify the discussion. So the first question, well, I'll ask them both. You've said several times that you want to enforce the ordinances and have an obligation to enforce the ordinances. I haven't heard you say whether or not there is any space in St. Louis that might meet your responsibility and also allow for an occupation similar to what we have going on at Keener Plaza. And then my second point of clarification, the idea of a speaker's corner was thrown out, and but it wasn't elaborated on very much, so we might each have in our mind an idea of what that is. So I thought it might help if you elaborate a little bit more about how that.
I would like to sort of answer both. I'll answer the second one, but I mean, I wanted to elaborate on Speaker's Corner with you guys. Like I said, I've been to Keener Plaza. I see how the process works at the General Assembly, so I wasn't coming with a fully formed opinion and the way that it should work, but I put it out there for discussion. I understand that it needs to be voted on twice. But I think that in tradition with civil disobedience, I reread I reread Thoreau's essay last night, and there is a way to I think for both of us to coexist, and I think it's through working out, I just really think it's through working out the Speaker's Corner. And I know it's not just about Speaker's Corner, I know it's about occupying space, but I think that the visibility that's important to you and the message that you're trying to get out, I think it would be more, I mean, personally effective if you were standing on a soapbox and you were marching around Keener Plaza instead of sleeping and maybe possibly getting in dangerous situations. I do applaud the services that you're providing to the homeless and other people, but and I know some of you are trained in that area, and maybe you're training other people, but I mean, I think it's not just, I like residentially challenged better than homeless as well, but I don't think that's the only concern down there. I mean, I think that the Speaker's Corner, whatever you want to call it, that's just the idea I got in my head. I just have a picture of an occupation of people, speaking their mind and people assembling or peacefully around whoever it is speaking, and listening.
But I guess what I'm asking is, do you have a specific space in mind? I mean, we might be picturing a little tiny 4x4 foot corner, and you might be picturing a larger plaza somewhere.
Well,
I
I'm
just wanna-
picturing Hyde Park's Speaker's Corner. That's what's in my head. I know we don't have that, but I
haven't
mean,
been
it's
there in
not
30
small.
years.
What'd you say?
I said I haven't been there in 30 years.
I know, it's been
so I don't
10 for
remember.
me, but,
So I'm just
it's
wondering
pretty- I
if
mean,
you
it's-
have something that we can take
this
back.
is where I would
that's
defer
more
to Eddie, honestly.
Well, I think.
We're picturing the lobby of Bank of America.
Well, you know, let's just talk about it. I mean, maybe not right here, but, you know, I mean, this was Maryland's brainstorm for today, saying, hey, how about this? And it captured our imaginations, and it seemed like it was in keeping with the spirit of what you were doing, and it seemed like something that would be consistent with our obligations to be even-handed, because, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people, I mean, the one gentleman who was standing right there before, who talked about setting a precedent, you know, and how hard this is. I think that's true. I mean, what we do here will have a lot to say about others who, you know, have different, very different messages from what you have. And so to the extent that we're thoughtful about accommodating in a neutral way people's free speech rights while still maintaining, you know, our parks and public space in ways that are conducive to public safety and good order, you know, that we can accomplish a lot here.
Hey, John, let me give John just a couple specifics. So, there is no perfect solution, okay? So there may be a space for nighttime that is not visible, but then you can come back and be visible during the daytime, or potentially you get a small space that is visible 24 hours a day. I mean, what we've decided not to do is to come here and throw out ideas, because we figured if we thought it was a good idea, you'd automatically think it was bad. You know, so we're trying to throw out some thoughts and get you to be thinking, because, you know, you're in a spot, we're in a spot. If we can work it out, we would prefer it to be that way.
Can I do a quick
And I
vibe check?
had a second question.
You'll
I had asked it already, whether there's any space at all that would meet both your needs and our current, something similar to our.
Sorry,
current-
asking
Is there a
again.
current space where there's not an ordinance that seems to fit both needs?
Well, we don't own that, so, there are some vacant lots, but they're not visible. I mean, they're not downtown. Now, again, that would be for daytime stuff, or nighttime stuff, and that's also, there are some union halls for nighttime stuff. This is where I asked you whether or not you needed to occupy a space 24 hours a day as a symbolic thing, or whether you felt like for 24 hours a day, all of you needed to be assembled together, and whether that also had to be visible and people had to see you sleeping together. You know, and I'm not telling you.
No pun intended.
I mean that, yes, I don't mean that. I mean, and, you know, and I'm not gonna tell you how to do your business. I'm telling you how I'm doing my business, but I'm not gonna tell you how to do your business. I only ask the question to try to better understand what your goals are. And so it's hard for us, John, to answer your question, because we don't really quite understand. Well, it's not that we don't understand. We hear sort of different goals from different folks in the group, and you all sort of have to decide what you want to be, and then see if we can accommodate it. If we can, and if we can't, we can't.
What I'd like to do is just take a quick vibe check here to see if we can't have suspend the stack and have a 5 or 10 minute conversation about our ideas, people's ideas on space that they might have. So give me a thumbs up, mediocre, or thumbs up on talking about space more specifically. Middle, mediocre, block. One block. I think it's consensus. All right, so let's. I'm going to go through the stack, and people should pass if they don't have an idea on space, and we'll come back to it. And if they do have an idea on space,
You want us to leave for a few minutes?
I guess that before you're part of this.
You're part of this.
all right.